Welcome to Mystery at 221B, where Sherlock Holmes' secrets come to life.
In the shadowed halls of Blackthorn Hall, a priceless relic vanishes under the watchful eyes of a grand dinner party. The Crimson Chalice, a ruby-encrusted treasure from the Crusades, is gone, stolen in mere minutes. Was it greed, revenge, or a secret buried centuries deep? Hercule Poirot, the master detective, unravels a web of lies where every guest hides a motive, and a cryptic letter warns of ruin. Who took the chalice? And what ancient debt demands its return? The truth lies in the shadows, waiting to be exposed. Chapter 1. The Crimson Chalice beckons. In the waning days of autumn, when the leaves of Kent painted the countryside in hues of amber and russet, the stately manor of Blackthorn Hall stood as a monument to both grandeur and secrecy. Nestled amidst rolling hills and guarded by ancient oaks, the hall was the ancestral seat of the Valmont family, a lineage as old as it was enigmatic. The manor's ivy-clad walls and towering chimneys whispered of wealth, tradition, and something altogether more sinister, a shadow that seemed to linger in the very air. It was here, in this crucible of opulence and restraint, that Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the faithful chronicler, found himself on a crisp October evening in 1925, invited to dine at the behest of his old friend, Sir Reginald Valmont. Hastings arrived at Blackthorn Hall in a hired motorcar, the gravel drive crunching beneath the wheels as the vehicle wound its way through the estate's manicured grounds. The invitation had been unexpected, delivered by a curt telegram that spoke of a matter of some delicacy requiring his presence. Sir Reginald, a retired diplomat with a penchant for rare antiquities, was not a man given to vague summons, and Hastings, ever curious, had accepted without hesitation. As he stepped from the car, the great oak doors of the hall swung open, revealing the austere figure of Mr. Grayson, the butler, whose face bore the impassive mask of long service. "Welcome, Captain Hastings," Grayson intoned, his voice as measured as the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. "Sir Reginald awaits you in the drawing-room." Hastings adjusted his tie and followed, his footsteps echoing on the polished marble floor. The interior of Blackthorn Hall was a study in contrasts. Opulent chandeliers cast golden light over somber portraits, their subjects staring down with eyes that seemed to follow one's every move. The air was heavy, with the scent of polished wood and wax, mingled with the faint tang of cigar smoke. Hastings, ever observant in his own modest way, noted the meticulous order of the place, every vase, every candelabrum perfectly positioned, as if the house itself were a stage set for some grand performance. In the drawing-room, a fire crackled in the hearth.
Eyes rose from an armchair to clasp Hastings's hand. "My dear Hastings," Sir Reginald said, his voice warm but tinged with an undercurrent of strain. "How good of you to come. Allow me to introduce my guests." The company was a small but eclectic one, each figure exuding an air of guarded civility. Lady Beatrice Valmont, Sir Reginald's younger sister, was a striking woman of 40, her auburn hair swept into an elegant chignon, her green eyes sharp with intelligence. She offered Hastings a polite smile, though her fingers toyed nervously with a pearl necklace. Beside her stood Dr. Mortimer Langley, a physician of some repute, whose round spectacles and dishevelled appearance suggested a man more at home with books than society. His wife, Mrs. Clara Langley, was a contrast in poise, her blonde curls and soft voice masking a keen watchfulness. Then there was Mr. Victor Crane, a solicitor from London, whose thin frame and pinched expression gave him the look of a man perpetually calculating. His ward, Miss Eleanor Gray, a young woman of 22, with delicate features and a quiet demeanour, seemed to shrink under the weight of the room's scrutiny. Finally, there was Major Harold Bryce, a retired military man with a booming voice and a ruddy complexion, who clapped Hastings on the shoulder with excessive familiarity. "Dinner will be served shortly," Sir Reginald announced, gesturing toward a set of double doors. "But first, allow me to show you something extraordinary." He led the party to an alcove, where upon a velvet-lined pedestal rested the object that had drawn whispers across Kent, the Crimson Chalice. It was a goblet of exquisite craftsmanship, its ruby-hued crystal catching the firelight in a dance of scarlet and gold. Intricate engravings of vines and mythical beasts adorned its surface, and a single emerald gleamed at its base. Sir Reginald's eyes gleamed with pride as he spoke. "This chalice," he said, "is said to date back to the Crusades, a relic of unparalleled value. It arrived in my possession only last month, under circumstances I shall not bore you with. Suffice it to say, it is the centerpiece of tonight's gathering." Hastings, no expert in antiquities, nonetheless felt a shiver of awe at the sight. There was something almost otherworldly about the chalice, as if it held secrets beyond its glittering exterior. The guests murmured their admiration, though Hastings noted a flicker of unease in Miss Grey's eyes and a tightening of Mr. Crane's lips. Dinner was a formal affair, served in a dining room lined with tapestries depicting medieval hunts. The conversation flowed as freely as the wine, touching on
Major Bryce's laughter rang a touch too loud. Only Miss Grey remained silent, her eyes downcast, though Hastings caught her glancing at Sir Reginald with an expression he could not quite decipher. As the dessert course was cleared, Sir Reginald rose, glass in hand, to propose a toast. "To the Crimson Chalice," he declared, "and to the secrets it guards." The words had scarcely left his lips when a piercing scream shattered the air. It came from the direction of the alcove, where Grayson the butler stood, his face ashen. The guests rushed to the scene, Hastings among them, only to find the pedestal empty. The Crimson Chalice was gone. "Where is it?" Sir Reginald demanded, his voice sharp with disbelief. "Grayson, what has happened?" I don't know, sir," the butler stammered. "I stepped away for but a moment to fetch more wine, and when I returned—" "Impossible," Major Bryce bellowed. "We were all at dinner. No one left the room." "Yet the chalice is gone," Lady Beatrice said, her voice icy. "And someone here must know why." Hastings' mind raced. The dining room was at the end of a long corridor with only one entrance and no windows. The guests had been together, save for Grayson's brief absence. A theft in such a confined setting seemed improbable, yet the evidence, or lack thereof, was undeniable. He thought of his friend, the inimitable Hercule Poirot, whose knack for unraveling such puzzles was unmatched. Surely Poirot would see through this fog of confusion. As if summoned by the thought, a knock sounded at the manor's great doors. Grayson, still shaken, excused himself to answer it. Moments later, he returned, announcing a visitor whose name brought a spark of hope to Hastings' heart. "Monsieur Hercule Poirot," Grayson said, stepping aside to reveal a diminutive figure in a perfectly tailored suit, his moustache immaculate, his eyes gleaming with quiet intelligence. "Bonsoir," Poirot said, bowing slightly. "I was passing through Kent when I received a most curious message from Captain Hastings, suggesting I might find Blackthorn Hall diverting. It seems, mes amis, that I have arrived at a most opportune moment." Hastings blinked, for he had sent no such message. Yet Poirot's presence was a balm to his nerves, and he knew better than to question the detective's methods.
The guests exchanged wary glances, their polite facades cracking under the weight of the missing chalice and Poirot's piercing gaze. "Tell me," Poirot said, his voice soft but commanding, "what has occurred here tonight?" As Sir Reginald recounted the theft, Poirot's eyes roamed the room, taking in every detail. The placement of the chairs, the half-empty wineglasses, the faint smudge of wax on the sideboard. Hastings knew that look.
Shadow of mystery hung heavy over the manor. The Crimson Chalice was more than a relic. It was a catalyst, and Hercule Poirot, with his little grey cells, was determined to uncover its secrets. Chapter 2. The Shadow of the Crime. The air in Blackthorn Hall grew thick with unease as the reality of the Crimson Chalice's disappearance settled over the assembled guests. The dining room, moments ago a stage for polite conversation and clinking glasses, now felt like a courtroom, with Hercule Poirot as its silent judge. The fire in the hearth sputtered, casting long shadows that danced across the tapestries as if mocking the confusion below. Captain Hastings stood near the alcove, his eyes darting between Poirot's calm demeanour and the agitated faces of the others, each of whom seemed to wrestle with their own private thoughts. Sir Reginald Velmont, his face flushed with indignation, paced before the empty pedestal. "This is intolerable," he exclaimed. "A theft under my own roof, in the presence of my guests. Grayson, you were responsible for the chalice's safety. How could you let this happen?" The butler, still pale, clasped his hands tightly before him. "I assure you, sir, I was gone for no more than 2 minutes. The wine cellar is but a short walk, and I heard nothing untoward. The chalice was there when I left, and gone when I returned." 2 minutes, Major Bryce scoffed, his ruddy cheeks glowing in the firelight. "Enough time for a thief to slip in and out, I'd wager. But who? We were all here, weren't we?" "Were we?" Lady Beatrice's voice cut through the room like a blade, her green eyes narrowing as she surveyed the group. "I recall Mr. Crane excusing himself briefly during the fish course. Perhaps he might enlighten us." Mr. Victor Crane, the solicitor, stiffened, his thin lips curling into a grimace. "I resent the implication, Lady Beatrice. I merely stepped out to retrieve my handkerchief from my coat in the hall. I was gone for a moment, no more." "And can anyone vouch for that?" Dr. Langley asked, his voice trembling slightly, though whether from nerves or suspicion, Hastings could not tell. "I was alone," Crane admitted, his tone defensive, "but I had no interest in the chalice. My concern is with legal matters, not relics." Miss Eleanor Gray, who had remained silent thus far, lifted her head, her soft voice barely audible. "I saw Mr. Crane return. He was not gone long. Surely it could not have been enough time." Her words trailed off under the weight of the room's scrutiny, and she shrank back, her delicate hands twisting in her lap. Hastings noted the protective glance Sir Reginald cast her way, a fleeting gesture that did not escape Poirot's keen observation. "Mes amis," Poirot interjected, his voice a soothing balm amidst the rising tension, "let us not leap to accusations. Monsieur Grayson, you say you were absent for 2 minutes. At what precise time did you leave the alcove?" Grayson hesitated, his brow furrowing.
"It was just after 9 o'clock, monsieur. The dessert course had begun, and Sir Reginald signalled for more wine."
"And you returned at," Poirot prompted, his fingers steepled before him.
9:02, perhaps 9:03,
Grayson replied.
"I checked the clock in the cellar as I fetched the bottle."
Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming with that peculiar intensity that Hastings knew signalled the activation of his little grey cells. "Bon. And during this time, no one left the dining room save for Monsieur Crane?" A murmur of agreement passed through the group, though Mrs. Clara Langley added,
"I did step to the window for a moment to admire the moon, but I was within sight of the table the entire time."
"Within sight," Poirot repeated, his tone neutral but his gaze sharp.
And what did you see, Madame Langley, when you admired this moon? Mrs. Langley blinked, caught off guard.
Why, nothing unusual. The gardens, the shadows of the trees. It was a clear night.
Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign Hastings recognized as amusement or skepticism, or both. A clear night, indeed. And you, Major Bryce, where were your eyes during these crucial minutes? The Major bristled, his mustache quivering. I was enjoying my dessert, sir. A fine trifle, I might add. I've no time for skulking about stealing goblets. Poirot raised a hand, forestalling further protests. Calm yourself, Major. I seek only the facts. Captain Hastings, my friend, you are observant in your own way. Did you notice anything out of place during dinner? Hastings flushed, unaccustomed to being put on the spot. Well, I suppose I was focused on the conversation, but I did notice Miss Grey seemed rather quiet, and Lady Beatrice kept glancing at the chalice. Lady Beatrice's eyes flashed. I was admiring it, Captain. It is, after all, a remarkable piece. Remarkable, oui, Poirot murmured, and now it is gone. Let us examine the scene of the crime, n'est-ce pas? He led the group to the alcove, his steps measured, his eyes scanning every inch of the space. The pedestal, a heavy mahogany affair, stood undisturbed, its velvet lining bearing the faint imprint of the chalice's base. Poirot knelt, his gloved fingers tracing the edge of the pedestal, then paused at a small smudge of wax on the nearby sideboard. Curieux, he said softly. This wax, it is fresh, from a candle perhaps, yet the candelabra here are electric. Dr. Langley peered over his spectacles. Perhaps a servant was careless. Perhaps, Poirot said, but his tone suggested otherwise. He rose, brushing his hands together, and turned to the group. Grayson, the timing, it is most precise, and precision is the enemy of deceit. As Grayson led Poirot and Hastings to the cellar, the remaining guests exchanged uneasy glances. The cellar, accessed via a narrow staircase off the kitchen, was a cool, stone-walled chamber lined with racks of bottles. A single clock hung on the wall, its hands pointing to 9:15. Poirot examined the space, noting the distance from the dining room, some 50 paces by Hastings' count, and the absence of any other exits. No windows, no other doors, Poirot observed. A thief would have needed to pass through the kitchen, where the servants were at work. Yet no one saw anything? Grayson shook his head. The kitchen staff were busy, monsieur. They reported nothing unusual. Back in the dining room, Poirot requested a moment alone with Hastings. As the others dispersed, he leaned close, his voice low. Mon ami, this theft, it is not what it seems. The chalice is valuable, oui, but its disappearance serves a purpose beyond mere greed. We must watch these people closely, their words, their gestures, their silences. The truth lies in the details. Hastings nodded, though his mind swirled with questions. But Poirot, how could anyone have taken it? We were all together, and the alcove is in plain view of the dining room. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Plain view, Hastings, is often the best place to hide a crime. The chalice was taken, but not by a phantom. Someone here knows more than they say, and I, Hercule Poirot, will uncover their secret. As the clock struck 10, the guests retired to their rooms, their faces etched with suspicion and fear. Hastings lingered, watching Poirot as he stood before the empty pedestal, his expression unreadable. The Crimson Chalice was more than a stolen relic. It was a key to a deeper mystery, one that Blackthorn Hall guarded with all the weight of its ancient walls. And as the night deepened, Hastings felt a chill that had little to do with the autumn air. Chapter 3. The Arrival of Poirot's Method. The morning after the theft of the Crimson Chalice dawned grey and heavy, with a mist clinging to the grounds of Blackthorn Hall like a shroud. Inside, the atmosphere was no less oppressive. The guests,
summoned to the drawing-room by a terse note from Sir Reginald, gathered in a semicircle of uneasy silence. The fire, rekindled by the servants, did little to dispel the chill that seemed to emanate not from the weather, but from the suspicion now festering among them. Captain Hastings stood by the window, his breath fogging the glass as he watched the fog swirl over the lawns, his mind replaying the events of the previous night. Hercule Poirot, immaculate as ever in a charcoal suit and polished shoes, stood at the center of the room, his presence commanding despite his diminutive stature. His moustache, he held a small notebook, its pages already filled with precise, minuscule handwriting, a testament to the workings of his little grey cells. Hastings knew that Poirot had spent the night in quiet contemplation, likely pacing his guest room while the rest of the house slept fitfully. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and deliberate, "I have been invited by Sir Reginald to investigate the disappearance of the Crimson Chalice, a task I undertake with the utmost seriousness. A theft. It is a violation of order, and Hercule Poirot, he does not abide disorder. We shall proceed methodically, with logic and precision, until the truth is revealed." Sir Reginald, seated in an armchair, nodded gravely. "I trust you implicitly, Monsieur Poirot. This outrage must be resolved. The chalice is not merely valuable, it is a symbol of my family's legacy." Lady Beatrice, standing near the hearth, arched an eyebrow. "A legacy that seems to attract misfortune, brother? Perhaps we should have left it in the vault." Her words drew a sharp glance from Sir Reginald, but Poirot raised a hand, forestalling any retort. "Let us begin with the facts," he said. "The chalice was taken between 9 and 9:03 last night, during Monsieur Grayson's absence. The dining room has one entrance, and the alcove is visible from the table. Yet no one saw the thief. This suggests either great cunning or great opportunity. I wish to speak with each of you privately, to understand your movements and your thoughts. Captain Hastings, you will assist me." Hastings, caught off guard, straightened. "Of course, Poirot. Whatever you need." Poirot's first interview was with Grayson the butler, who stood rigidly before him, his hands clasped behind his back. "Monsieur Grayson," Poirot said, "you are the guardian of this house's order. Tell me precisely what you did when you left the dining room." Grayson cleared his throat. "As I said, monsieur, I went to the wine cellar at Sir Reginald's request. The bottle was on the third rack, second shelf. I selected it, checked the label, and returned immediately. The clock in the cellar read 9:02 when I left." "And you saw no one in the corridor?" Poirot pressed. "No one, monsieur. The kitchen staff were at their posts, and the corridor was empty." Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. "And the chalice? It was in your care. Had you noticed anything unusual about it before its disappearance? A visitor, perhaps? Or a guest showing undue interest?" Grayson hesitated, his gaze flickering. I did notice Miss Grey lingering near the alcove earlier in the evening, before dinner. She seemed curious about the chalice." Hastings glanced at Poirot, expecting a reaction, but the detective merely nodded. "Merci, Monsieur Grayson. You may go." Next came Lady Beatrice, whose composure was as sharp as her tongue. She seated herself with the grace,
her green eyes meeting Poirot's without flinching. "I have nothing to hide, Monsieur Poirot," she said. "I was at the table all evening, save for a moment to adjust my shawl in the hall. I saw nothing of the chalice's theft." "And your interest in the chalice?" Poirot asked, his tone mild. "Captain Hastings noted your frequent glances." Lady Beatrice's lips twitched. "It is a beautiful object, and I am not immune to beauty. But I assure you, I had no hand in its disappearance. My brother's obsession with it, however, has caused no end of trouble." "Trouble?" Poirot tilted his head. "Of what nature?" She hesitated, then said, "Reginald has been secretive since acquiring it. He received letters, anonymous I believe, warning him against displaying it. He dismissed them as nonsense.
but I wonder now if they were more than threats. Poirot made a note in his book, his expression unreadable. Merci, madame. That is most illuminating. The interviews continued, each guest offering their account with varying degrees of candor. Dr. Mortimer Langley admitted to a brief absence to fetch a medical journal from his room, claiming it was during the soup course, well before the theft. His wife, Clara, corroborated his story, though her eyes darted nervously as she spoke. Major Bryce, bombastic as ever, insisted he had been rooted to his chair all evening, his only crime being an over-fondness for the trifle. Mr. Crane, still bristling from Lady Beatrice's accusation, reiterated his story about the handkerchief, though he admitted to passing near the alcove on his return. Miss Eleanor Gray was the last to be questioned, her delicate frame trembling as she sat before Poirot. "I didn't take it, monsieur," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know Mr. Grayson saw me near the chalice, but I was only looking. It's so beautiful, and Sir Reginald spoke of its history. I meant no harm." Poirot's gaze softened, but his questions were relentless. "And what did you see, mademoiselle, when you looked? Anything out of place? A shadow, perhaps, or a sound?" Eleanor's brow furrowed. I thought I heard a rustle, like fabric, near the alcove. But when I looked, there was nothing. I thought I imagined it." Poirot leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "A rustle, you say? Most interesting. And when was this?" "Just before we were called to dinner," she replied. "Around 8:30. After the interviews, Poirot and Hastings retired to the library, a cavernous room lined with leather-bound tomes and heavy drapes. Poirot paced before a map of the manor, which Sir Reginald had provided, his finger tracing the layout of the dining room, alcove, and surrounding corridors. "Hastings," he said, "this theft, it is a puzzle of timing and opportunity. The alcove is a
Smudge of wax. It bothers me. It is a clue. But to what?" Hastings frowned.
Could it be a servant? Someone we haven't questioned?
Poirot shook his head. No. The servants, they are busy, and their alibis are corroborated by the kitchen staff. The answer lies with our guests. Each has a motive, perhaps, or a secret. Lady Beatrice speaks of anonymous letters. Miss Gray hears a rustle. Mr. Crane, he is too quick to defend himself. And the good Major, his bluster, it hides something, I think. "But Poirot," Hastings said, "the chalice is so large, so distinctive. Where could it be hidden? The manor is vast, but surely someone would have seen it being carried away." Poirot's eyes twinkled. Hidden, Hastings? Or perhaps not hidden at all? The mind, it plays tricks when we assume too much. I must think, and I must observe. Tonight we shall dine again with our suspects, and I shall watch their eyes, their hands, their silences. The truth, it is close, but it requires the order of Poirot's method to reveal it. As the afternoon waned, Hastings felt a growing sense of unease. The theft of the Crimson Chalice was no simple crime. It was a thread in a tapestry of secrets woven through the lives of those within Blackthorn Hall. And as Poirot prepared for the evening's dinner, his calm assurance was both a comfort and a warning. For when Hercule Poirot set his mind to a mystery, no secret could remain buried for long. Chapter 4. The Questions Deepen. The mist that had cloaked Blackthorn Hall in the morning lingered into the afternoon, curling around the manor's turrets like a conspirator's whisper. Inside, the drawing-room remained the epicenter of tension, its heavy drapes and somber portraits seeming to absorb the unease of the gathered guests. Captain Hastings, standing near the hearth, felt the weight of the previous night's theft pressing upon him, compounded by the knowledge that Hercule Poirot's methodical mind was now fully engaged. The detective, seated in a high-backed chair, his small notebook open on his lap, surveyed the room with the calm precision of a watchmaker
assembling a delicate mechanism. The interviews had concluded, but Poirot had requested the guests' presence once more, this time to discuss the manor's layout and the precise movements of each individual during the critical window of the theft. A large table had been brought in, upon which lay Sir Reginald's map of Blackthorn Hall, its corridors and rooms meticulously detailed. Poirot stood before it, his gloved finger tracing the path from the dining room to the alcove and beyond. "Mes amis," he began, his voice as smooth as polished oak, "the disappearance of the Crimson Chalice is a puzzle of geometry and time. The alcove,
To establish with absolute certainty where each of you was between 9 and 9:03 last night. Let us proceed with order." Sir Reginald, his face still etched with indignation, spoke first. "I was at the head of the table, Monsieur Poirot, leading the conversation. I signaled for Grayson to fetch the wine just before 9, as he said. I saw no one leave the room." Poirot nodded, his eyes flicking to Lady Beatrice. "And you, madame?" Lady Beatrice adjusted her pearl necklace, her movements deliberate. "I was seated to my brother's left, engaged in a discussion about the chalice's provenance with Dr. Langley. I remained there throughout the dessert course. Dr. Mortimer Langley, his spectacles slipping down his nose, cleared his throat. I was opposite Lady Beatrice, as she says. My wife was to my right, and I recall no one leaving the table, save for Mr. Crane's brief absence earlier." Mrs. Clara Langley nodded, her blonde curls bobbing. "I was at the table, except for my moment at the window, as I mentioned. I saw nothing unusual." Major Bryce, his voice booming, leaned forward. "I was at the foot of the table, enjoying my trifle. No skulking about for me, Poirot. I'm a man of action, not stealth." Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint sign of amusement. "And you, Monsieur Crane?" The solicitor's thin frame seemed to tighten under scrutiny. "As I said, I stepped out during the fish course to retrieve my handkerchief. I was back well before 9. I sat between Miss Grey and Major Bryce, and I saw nothing out of the ordinary." Miss Eleanor Grey, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, spoke softly. "I was at the table, monsieur. I didn't notice anything. I was lost in thought, perhaps." Poirot's gaze lingered on her, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Lost in thought, mademoiselle? About the chalice, perhaps, or something else?" Eleanor flushed, her eyes dropping to the floor. "I was thinking of personal matters, nothing to do with the theft." Poirot made a note, his expression unreadable. "Very well. Let us now consider the servants. Monsieur Grayson, you have provided a list of those on duty last night. I wish to speak with the footman, Thomas, and the maid Sarah, who were in the kitchen." Grayson, standing near the door, bowed slightly. "Of course, monsieur. I shall fetch them." The footman, Thomas, a young man with a nervous demeanour, entered first. His livery was immaculate, but his hands fidgeted as he stood before Poirot. "I was in the kitchen, sir, helping with the dishes," he said. "I didn't leave until after dinner when we cleared the table." "And you saw no one in the corridor?" Poirot asked. "No, sir. It was quiet. Only Mr. Grayson passed through to the cellar." Sarah, the maid, was next, her round face pale with anxiety. "I was in the kitchen too, monsieur." Questions were relentless, probing every detail of their tasks, their positions, and their observations. Neither servant could offer more than confirmation of Grayson's timeline. Yet Poirot's expression suggested he was not entirely satisfied. He dismissed them with a nod, then turned to the map once more. "Hastings," he said, beckoning his friend aside, "there is something here that does not align. The chalice, it is large, oui? A foot tall, heavy with crystal and gold. To remove it in 2 minutes without being seen requires not only opportunity but audacity. Yet the alibis, they are too perfect, too neat. And this wax," he gestured to the smudge on the sideboard, which he had marked with a small piece of chalk. "It is not from the electric candelabra. It is a clue, but it does not yet speak." Hastings frowned, his mind grappling with the puzzle. "Could someone have hidden it in the dining room itself? Under the table, perhaps, or behind a tapestry?"
Poirot shook his head. Non, mon ami. The chalice is too distinctive to be concealed so crudely. No, the answer lies in the psychology of our suspects. Someone has lied, but their lie is subtle, hidden in the truth. We must look deeper. The afternoon passed in a flurry of activity, as Poirot requested access to the guests' rooms, a request that drew protests from Major Bryce and a frosty glare from Lady Beatrice. Sir Reginald, however, granted permission, eager for any progress. Poirot and Hastings moved methodically through each room, searching for anything out of place, a hidden compartment, a trace of the chalice or another clue. In Mr. Crane's room they found a stack of legal documents, including a draft of Sir Reginald's will, which named Lady Beatrice and Miss Grey as beneficiaries. In Dr. Langley's room, a bottle of sedative tablets caught Poirot's eye, though the doctor claimed they were for his own insomnia. Miss Grey's room yielded a small diary, locked and unopened, which Poirot noted but did not touch. As evening approached, Poirot gathered the guests once more in the dining room, where dinner was to be served. The atmosphere was strained, the previous night's civility replaced by guarded glances and terse exchanges. Poirot, seated at the table, observed each guest with a quiet intensity, his fork poised as if it were a scalpel dissecting their behavior. "Hastings," he murmured, leaning close. "Watch their hands. The hands they betray what the lips conceal. See how Lady Beatrice clutches her napkin, how Mr. Crane's fingers tremble when he speaks of the chalice. There is fear here, and fear is the shadow of guilt." Dinner passed without incident, but the tension was palpable. As the guests retired, Poirot lingered in the dining room, his eyes fixed on the alcove. "Tomorrow," he said to Hastings, "we shall explore the grounds. The chalice may not be far, and the grounds, they hold secrets as surely as this house." Hastings nodded, though his heart sank at the complexity of the case. The Crimson Chalice was more than a stolen relic. It was a catalyst for hidden truths, and Poirot's relentless pursuit of those truths filled him with both admiration and dread. As the clock chimed 9, echoing the hour of the theft, Hastings felt the weight of Blackthorn Hall's mysteries pressing ever closer. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The dawn of the third day at Blackthorn Hall broke with a reluctant sun, its rays struggling through the persistent mist that clung to the Kentish countryside. The manor, with its ivy-draped walls and silent corridors, seemed to hold its breath, as if aware that Hercule Poirot's investigation was tightening like a noose around its secrets. Captain Arthur Hastings, roused early by a restless night, found himself in the library, where Poirot stood before the map of the estate, his small figure radiating an almost palpable energy. The detective's notebook, now brimming with cryptic annotations, lay open on a side table, its pages a testament to the relentless workings of his mind. "Bon matin, Hastings," Poirot said without turning, his voice crisp. "Today we shall stir the waters and see what rises to the surface. The chalice, it is not merely stolen, it is a symbol, and symbols provoke reactions. We must observe these reactions closely." Hastings nodded, though his thoughts were muddled by the complexity of the case. "You think someone will slip up, Poirot? They all seem so certain of their stories." Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing beneath it. "Certain, oui, but certainty is often the mask of deceit. The alibis, they are too perfect, like a painting without flaws. It lacks life. Today, we shall introduce a little chaos and watch how our suspects respond." The morning's plan was revealed over breakfast, where the guests, bleary-eyed and tense, gathered in the dining room. Sir Reginald, his face haggard from lack of sleep, announced that Poirot had requested a thorough search of the manor's grounds, a task to be undertaken by the guests themselves under the detective's supervision. The suggestion drew murmurs of protest, particularly from Major Bryce, whose booming voice carried a note of indignation. "A search of the grounds?" he blustered, slamming his coffee cup onto its saucer. "Are we to play bloodhounds now, Poirot?
I'm no thief, and I'll not be treated as one." Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet amusement. "Mon cher Major, no one accuses you, yet. But the chalice, it is large, distinctive. If it remains on the estate, the grounds are a logical place to look. And who better to assist than those who know the manner best?" Lady Beatrice's lips pursed, her green eyes narrowing. "This feels like an exercise in futility, Monsieur Poirot. If the thief was clever enough to take it unseen, surely, but unyielding. But the mind of a thief is not always as clever as it believes. Indulge me, madame." The search began at 10 o'clock, with the guests divided into pairs to cover the sprawling estate. Poirot assigned Hastings to accompany Miss Eleanor Gray, while he himself paired with Sir Reginald. Lady Beatrice and Dr. Langley formed one group, Major Bryce and Mrs. Clara Langley another, and Mr. Crane was tasked with Grayson to search the stables and outbuildings. Poirot's instructions were precise. Look for disturbed earth, hidden compartments, or any sign of the chalice's ruby-hued crystal catching the light. As Hastings and Miss Gray walked the rose garden, the young woman's delicate frame seemed weighed down by more than the morning chill. Her eyes, red-rimmed, darted nervously, and her hands twisted the hem of her shawl. Hastings, ever the gentleman, sought to put her at ease. "No need to fret, Miss Gray," he said kindly. "Poirot's methods may seem peculiar, but he always gets his man, or woman, as the case may be." Eleanor's lips trembled into a faint smile. "I hope so, Captain. This whole affair makes me uneasy. The chalice, it's so beautiful, but it feels cursed somehow." "Cursed?" Hastings raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "That's a strong word. Why do you say that?" She hesitated, glancing over her shoulder as if expecting to be overheard. "Sir Reginald spoke of its history at dinner, the Crusades, the blood it's said to have spilled. I couldn't help but feel it was watching us." Hastings, though sceptical of such fancies, noted her words. Poirot had taught him that even the most fanciful statements could hold a kernel of truth. They continued their search, checking beneath hedges and behind stone benches, but found nothing save for a gardener's forgotten trowel, its handle worn but unremarkable. Meanwhile, Poirot and Sir Reginald combed the orchard, the detective's keen eyes scanning every tree and shadow. Sir Reginald, his mood sombre, spoke little, though he did reveal a troubling detail. "I should have mentioned earlier, Poirot," he said, pausing by an ancient apple tree. "The chalice came with a warning, a letter, unsigned, delivered to my London office. It urged me to keep it hidden, lest it bring ruin." Poirot's head tilted, his interest piqued. "And this letter, you have it still?" Sir Reginald nodded. "In my study. I dismissed it as the work of a crank, but now—" "Bon," Poirot said. "We shall examine it later. For now tell me, Sir Reginald, who among your guests might have reason to resent the chalice's presence?" Sir Reginald frowned, his eyes distant. "Beatrice, perhaps. She's never approved of my collecting habits, calls them extravagant, and Crane. He's been pressing me to revise my will, though I can't imagine an unexpected development." Major Bryce and Mrs. Langley, returning from the herb garden, reported finding a scrap of fabric caught on a thorn bush near the manor's rear entrance. It was a delicate silk, deep blue, and Mrs. Langley's face paled as she handed it to Poirot. This looks like the shawl I wore last night," she stammered. "But I swear I never went near the herb garden." Poirot examined the fabric, his fingers tracing its weave. "Curieux," he murmured. "And yet, here it is. Tell me, madame, did you lend your shawl to anyone?" "Never," she insisted, her voice rising. "I kept it with me all evening, except when I left it in the hall during dinner." The discovery sent a ripple of suspicion through the group, and Hastings saw Mr. Crane's eyes narrow as he glanced at Mrs. Langley. Lady Beatrice, however, seized the moment to deflect attention. "If we're pointing fingers," she said sharply, "perhaps we should ask Mr. Crane about his handkerchief. He was awfully quick to leave the table last night." Crane's face reddened. "I've told you. I needed it for a spill. This is absurd." Poirot raised a hand, his voice cutting through the rising tempers. "Enough, mes amis. This fabric, it is a clue, but it is also a distraction. The thief wishes us to chase shadows, to suspect one another. But Hercule Poirot, he does not chase, he observes." Back in the library, Poirot examined the silk scrap under a magnifying glass, noting its fine quality and the faint scent of lavender clinging to it. He then requested Sir Reginald's anonymous letter, which proved to be a single sheet of cheap paper, the words typed in a haphazard script. "The Crimson Chalice brings death. Hide it, or lose all." "Hastings," Poirot said, his voice low, "this letter, it is not a warning, it is a provocation. The thief, they wish to unsettle Sir Reginald, to make the chalice a focal point. But why? The answer lies not in the chalice itself, but in what it represents." Hastings, struggling to follow, ventured, "You think this is about something other than money? Revenge, perhaps?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Revenge, greed, fear. These are the threads of human nature, and one of them binds our thief. Tonight we shall dine again, and I shall apply a little pressure. The red herrings, they multiply, but the truth, it remains constant." As the evening meal approached, Hastings felt the weight of suspicion settling over Blackthorn Hall like the mist outside. The scrap of fabric, the anonymous letter, the perfect alibis, all were pieces of a puzzle that Poirot was assembling with relentless precision. Yet the shadow Poirot's unfolding drama. The dining room, with its long mahogany table and flickering candelabra, seemed to close in around the company, the air thick with unspoken accusations. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated to Poirot's right, felt the tension like a taut wire, ready to snap at the slightest provocation. The detective himself, however, remained a picture of calm, his movements precise as he sipped his consommé, his green eyes darting from face to face with the acuity of a hawk. The conversation was stilted, punctuated by awkward silences and forced pleasantries. Sir Reginald, at the head of the table, made a valiant effort to discuss the weather, but his words fell flat, overshadowed by the empty pedestal in the alcove. Lady Beatrice, her auburn hair gleaming in the candlelight, toyed with her wineglass, her fingers betraying a nervous energy. Dr. Mortimer Langley, his spectacles fogging slightly from the steam of his soup, kept his eyes fixed on his plate, while his wife, Clara, cast furtive glances towards the door. Major Bryce, true to form, filled the silence with a booming anecdote about his days in India, though even his bravado seemed strained. Mr. Crane and Miss Eleanor Gray, seated side by side, spoke little, their expressions guarded. Poirot, ever the orchestrator, waited until the main course, roast pheasant with chestnut stuffing, was served before steering the conversation towards the theft. "Mes amis," he said, his voice cutting through the clatter of cutlery. "The Crimson Chalice, it is a most remarkable object, no? Its beauty, its history, it inspires passion, perhaps even obsession. Tell me, what did each of you feel when you first saw it?" The question, posed with disarming simplicity, elicited a range of reactions. Sir Reginald's face softened, his pride evident. "It was a triumph," he said, "a relic of the Crusades, a testament to human artistry. I felt honored to possess it." Lady Beatrice's lips curled slightly. "I found it ostentatious," she admitted. Beautiful, yes, but a magnet for trouble. I warned Reginald it would draw unwanted attention. Dr. Langley adjusted his spectacles, his voice hesitant. As a man of science, I saw it as a curiosity, an artifact of historical interest, but nothing more. His wife Clara nodded. It was lovely, but unsettling. There's something about it that feels heavy, as if it carries a weight beyond its form. Major Bryce laughed, a touch too loudly. A fine piece, I'll grant you, but I'm no collector. I'd rather have a good horse than a goblet, no matter how old. Mr. Crane's response was curt. It's valuable, certainly, but my interest lies in contracts, not curios. I saw it as a liability.
Methods. Knew the detective had seized upon something significant. Watching, mademoiselle? Poirot repeated. A curious choice of words. And yet, perhaps the chalice does see more than we know. Let us consider a detail, a small thing, easily overlooked. The wax on the sideboard near the alcove. It is not from the electric candelabra, yet it is fresh. Who among you used a candle last night? A murmur of denial rippled through the group. Sir Reginald frowned. The manor is fully electrified, Monsieur Poirot. We've no need for candles, save in an emergency. Precisely, Poirot said, his tone sharp. And yet, there is wax. A clue, mes amis, that does not lie. Someone brought a candle to the alcove, perhaps to light their way in the dark. But why? The room was lit, the chalice in plain view. The guests exchanged uneasy glances, and Hastings noted a slight tremor in Mrs. Langley's hand as she reached for her glass. Poirot's gaze lingered on her, though he said nothing, instead turning to Grayson, who stood at attention near the sideboard. Monsieur Grayson, Poirot said, you are meticulous in your duties. Did you notice any candles in use last night, perhaps among the servants? Grayson shook his head. No, monsieur. The servants use electric lamps for their tasks. I can assure you, no candles were lit in the dining room or alcove. Poirot nodded, his expression inscrutable. Bon, then let us consider another detail, the timing. Monsieur Grayson, you left for the cellar at 9 o'clock, returning at 9:02 or 9:03. During this time, Madame Langley, you were at the window. Monsieur Crane, you were at the table, having returned from your earlier absence. Yet Miss Gray heard a rustle near the alcove at 8:30. This rustle, it is significant, no? It suggests someone was near the chalice before the theft. Miss Gray's face paled, her eyes wide. I thought it was nothing, monsieur. Just the wind, perhaps, or a curtain. Perhaps, Poirot said, his voice soft but probing. But the mind, it notices what the heart fears to acknowledge. Tell me, mademoiselle, was there anything else? A shadow? A movement? Eleanor hesitated, her fingers twisting in her lap. I'm not sure. It was so quick, like a whisper of movement. I looked, but there was nothing. Poirot made a note, his pen moving,
Brewing among the guests.
Poirot paced before the map, his hands clasped behind his back. Hastings, he said, his voice low. The wax, it is the key. It is not a careless mark, it is deliberate, a trace left by someone who needed light in a moment of darkness. But why a candle when the room was lit? This is no ordinary theft. The chalice, it is a distraction.
a means to an end. And Miss Grey's rustle, it is not imagination. Someone moved near the alcove before the theft, preparing, perhaps. Hastings frowned, struggling to keep up. But Poirot, if it was planned, how did they get it out of the room? The alcove is in plain sight, and no one could carry something so large without being noticed. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Plain sight, mon ami, is the best place to hide. The chalice was not carried away. It was moved, yes, but not far. I suspect it remains within this house, hidden where we least expect. Tomorrow we shall examine the alcove itself, its every inch, and we shall watch our suspects, for one of them is beginning to crack. As they retired for the night, Hastings felt a chill that had little to do with the autumn air. The wax, the rustle, the anonymous letter. These were not mere clues, but threads in a web that Poirot was weaving with meticulous care. The Crimson Chalice was more than a stolen relic. It was a catalyst for secrets, and Hastings knew that Poirot's relentless pursuit would soon bring those secrets into the light. Chapter 7. More Lies Surface. The fourth day at Blackthorn Hall dawned with a sullen sky, the mist of the previous days giving way to a steady drizzle that pattered against the manor's leaded windows. The oppressive atmosphere within the house mirrored the weather, as the guests, now weary from days of suspicion and scrutiny, gathered in the drawing-room at Hercule Poirot's request. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing near the hearth, felt the weight of the investigation pressing upon him, each new clue adding to the labyrinthine mystery of the Crimson Chalice. Poirot, as ever, was a beacon of calm, his immaculate suit and polished demeanor a stark contrast to the disheveled nerves of those around him. The detective stood before the group, his small notebook in hand, its pages now a dense tapestry of observations and deductions. His green eyes, sharp as ever, swept over the assembled company. Sir Reginald, Lady Beatrice, Dr. and Mrs. Langley, Major Bryce, Mr. Crane, and Miss Eleanor Gray, each of whom seemed to shrink under his gaze. The empty pedestal in the alcove loomed like a silent accuser, its velvet lining a mocking reminder of the chalice's,
and see what shadows it casts. I have questions, and I expect answers, truthful ones. Sir Reginald, his face etched with exhaustion, leaned forward. Monsieur Poirot, we've told you all we know. What more can we offer? The chalice is gone, and we're no closer to finding it. Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign Hastings recognized as a prelude to a revelation. No, Sir Reginald, we are closer than you think. The truth, it hides in the contradictions, the small slips of the tongue. Let us revisit the evening of the theft. Madame Langley, you were at the window admiring the moon, yet you claim you saw nothing unusual. Tell me, what was the time when you stepped to the window? Mrs. Clara Langley, her blonde curls framing a face pale with strain, hesitated. It was just after 9, I believe. The dessert course had begun. Just after 9, Poirot repeated, his tone deceptively mild. And yet, Monsieur Grayson left for the cellar at 9 precisely. You were at the window during his absence, no? Did you see him pass through the corridor? Clara's eyes widened, her fingers tightening around her handkerchief. I didn't notice. I was looking outside, as I said. Poirot's gaze sharpened. Outside, madame? Or perhaps toward the alcove? The window, it is close to the partition that obscures the pedestal. A glance, a moment's distraction. Surely you saw something. I saw nothing, she insisted, her voice rising. Dr. Langley placed a hand on her arm, his own expression tense. Easy, Clara, he murmured, then turned to Poirot. My wife is not accustomed to such interrogations, Monsieur Poirot. She's told you what she knows. Poirot nodded, but his attention shifted to Mr. Crane, whose thin frame seemed to quiver with suppressed agitation. "Monsieur Crane," he said, "you have been most vocal about your brief absence for a handkerchief, yet your ward, Mademoiselle Gray, says she saw you return before 9. Can you confirm the exact time?" Crane's lips pursed, his eyes narrowing. "I returned at 8:50, as I've said. I was at the table when Grayson left for the cellar. Ask anyone." "Indeed, I have," Poirot said, consulting his notebook. "And yet, Mademoiselle Gray, you heard a rustle near the alcove at 8:30. Monsieur Crane, you passed near the alcove on your return, did you not? Did you hear this rustle?" Crane's face reddened. "I heard nothing of the sort. I was in the hall, retrieving my handkerchief, and returned directly to my seat." Miss Gray, her delicate features flushed, spoke up. I didn't mean to imply anything, monsieur. It was just a sound, perhaps nothing." Poirot's eyes softened, but his voice remained firm. "Nothing, mademoiselle, is never nothing."
Poise of a statue, her green eyes unyielding. "Madame, you mentioned anonymous letters warning your brother about the chalice. Have you seen these letters yourself?" Lady Beatrice's fingers paused on her pearl necklace. "I saw one, yes, when Reginald showed it to me. It was as he described, tight, vague, threatening ruin. I told him to take it seriously, but he laughed it off." "And where were you, madame, at 8:30 when Mademoiselle Gray heard her rustle?" Poirot asked. Lady Beatrice's lips curled slightly. "I was in the drawing room, Monsieur Poirot, with the others, waiting to be called to dinner. I have no reason to skulk about alcoves." Poirot made a note, his pen moving with deliberate care. "Bon. But let us now consider a new detail, a contradiction. Monsieur Grayson, you said the kitchen staff saw no one in the corridor during your absence. Yet I have spoken with the maid, Sarah, who recalls seeing a shadow pass the kitchen door just before 9. A shadow, mes amis, that she could not identify." Grayson's face paled, his hands clasping tightly. "A shadow? She said nothing of this to me, monsieur." "Perhaps," Poirot said, "because she feared to speak. But this shadow, it moves us closer to the truth. Someone was in the corridor, near the alcove at the critical moment, and I believe this someone carries a secret heavier than the chalice itself." The room fell silent, the weight of Poirot's words settling over the guests like the drizzle outside. Hastings, watching closely, saw Major Bryce's ruddy face flush deeper, his fingers drumming on the arm of his chair. Dr. Langley's spectacles slipped further down his nose, and Mrs. Langley's handkerchief was now a crumpled ball in her hands. Poirot closed his notebook with a snap. "Tonight, I shall examine the alcove once more, and I invite you all to join me. The truth, it is like a locked door, and I, Hercule Poirot, hold the key." The examination took place after tea in the fading light of the afternoon. The alcove, bathed in the glow of electric lamps, revealed little at first glance. The pedestal stood empty, its velvet lining undisturbed, save for the faint imprint of the chalice's base. Poirot, armed with a magnifying glass, knelt to inspect the floor, his movements slow and deliberate. "Hastings," he said softly, "observe this." He pointed to a faint scratch on the floorboards, barely visible, running from the pedestal to the partition. A mark so small, yet so telling. Something heavy was dragged here, perhaps not far. Hastings frowned. "The chalice? But where could it be hidden? We've searched everywhere." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Not everywhere, mon ami. The lies, they multiply. Mrs. Langley's hesitation, Crane's defensiveness, the shadow in the corridor, these are not coincidences.
Someone here knows more than they say, and their secret is tied to the chalice's history. Tomorrow we shall press harder, and the truth will begin to crack. Hastings nodded, his mind racing. The Crimson Chalice was no longer just a stolen relic. It was a key to a web of deception, and Poirot's relentless pursuit was unraveling it, thread by thread. As the rain continued to fall, Blackthorn Hall seemed to close in around them, its secrets poised to surface at last. Chapter 8. The Emotional Turning Point. The rain that had begun as a drizzle now fell in earnest, drumming against the windows of Blackthorn Hall with a relentless rhythm that seemed to echo the mounting tension within. The fifth day of Hercule Poirot's investigation dawned under a sky so dark it might have been twilight, casting the manor's grand rooms in a pall of gloom. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing in the library, felt the weight of the past days pressing upon him, each clue and contradiction tightening the knot of mystery surrounding the Crimson Chalice. The house, once a symbol of elegance, now felt like a labyrinth of secrets, its corridors whispering with unspoken truths. Hercule Poirot, as ever, was the calm at the center of the storm. He stood before the map of the manor, his small figure radiating an almost palpable intensity. His notebook, now a dense chronicle of observations, lay open on a table, its pages filled with the meticulous script that Hastings knew was the blueprint of Poirot's deductions. The detective's green eyes gleamed with a quiet certainty, as if he sensed the case was nearing a critical juncture. "Mon ami," Poirot said, turning to Hastings, "today we shall apply a different kind of pressure, not to the facts, but to the hearts of our suspects. The truth, it hides not only in what is said, but in what is felt. We must provoke a reaction, a crack in the facade, to see what lies beneath." Hastings, puzzled but accustomed to Poirot's cryptic methods, nodded. "You think someone's about to break, Poirot? They've all held their stories so tightly." Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing beneath it. "Oui, Hastings, but even the strongest wall crumbles under the right pressure. The chalice, it is not merely stolen, it is a catalyst, stirring passions and fears. Today we shall see who cannot bear the weight of their own secrets." The morning began with a gathering in the drawing room, where Poirot had requested the presence of all guests and key servants. The atmosphere was electric with unease, the guests' faces etched with exhaustion and suspicion. Sir Reginald, his silver hair dishevelled, sat with a rigid posture, his eyes fixed on the empty alcove. Lady Beatrice, her green eyes sharp but weary, Langley and his wife Clara sat close together, their hands intertwined, while Major Bryce's ruddy face bore a scowl of impatience. Mr. Crane, his thin frame taut, avoided eye contact, and Miss Eleanor Gray, pale and trembling, seemed on the verge of collapse. Poirot stood before the group, his hands clasped behind his back, his voice steady but commanding. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "the disappearance of the Crimson Chalice has revealed much about this house and its inhabitants. We have found wax where there should be none, a scratch where no object was moved, a shadow where no one claims to have been. These are not mere details, they are the threads of a tapestry woven with deceit. But there is another thread, one that binds you all: motive. Today, I wish to speak of why the chalice was taken, not for its value, but for what it represents." A murmur of unease rippled through the room. Sir Reginald leaned forward, his voice hoarse. "Monsieur Poirot, you speak in riddles. If you know something, tell us plainly. Who took the chalice?" Poirot raised a hand, his eyes narrowing. "Patience, Sir Reginald. The truth, it is like a fine wine. It must breathe before it can be savoured. Let us consider the motives. The chalice, it is a symbol of wealth, of legacy, but also of secrets. Madame Langley, you spoke of its heavy presence. What did you mean by this?" Clara Langley's face paled,
her fingers tightening around her husband's hand. I only meant it felt ominous, Monsieur Poirot. It's history, the stories of blood and betrayal. It unsettled me. Unsettled, Poirot repeated, his tone probing. And yet, you were near the alcove at the critical moment, admiring the moon. Or perhaps you saw something else, something you fear to admit. Clara's eyes filled with tears, and she shook her head vehemently. I saw nothing. I swear it. Dr. Langley, his voice sharp, interjected.
Leave her be, Poirot. She's told you all she knows. This interrogation is cruel.
Poirot's gaze softened, but he pressed on. Cruel, perhaps, but necessary. And you, Monsieur Crane, you have been most insistent about your handkerchief. Yet, I find it curious that a solicitor, a man of precision, would need to leave the table for such a trivial item. Was there another purpose to your absence? Crane's face reddened, his thin lips trembling. I've told you, I spilled wine on my cuff. I needed the handkerchief to clean it. This is harassment. Miss Grey, her voice barely audible, spoke up. He did have a stain, Monsieur Poirot. I saw it when he returned. Poirot's eyes, her fingers pausing on her necklace. I thought it serious, yes. I urged Reginald to lock the chalice away, but he was stubborn. He said it was his right to display it. And yet, Poirot said, his voice cutting like a blade, someone here agreed with the letter's warning. Someone believed the chalice brought danger, not to the house, but to themselves. Who among you carries a secret tied to this relic? The question hung in the air, heavy and accusing. Major Bryce, his face flushed, slammed a fist on the arm of his chair. This is nonsense, Poirot. You're fishing, trying to make us turn on each other. I've had enough of this. But before Poirot could respond, Miss Eleanor Grey let out a choked sob, her hands covering her face. The room turned to her, startled, as she trembled, her voice breaking. I can't bear it any more, she whispered. I know something, Monsieur Poirot. Not about the chalice, but about Sir Reginald. He's not what he seems. A gasp rippled through the group. Sir Reginald's face drained of colour, his eyes wide with shock. Eleanor, what are you saying? Speak plainly, girl. Eleanor's tears fell freely now, her voice shaking. I heard him the night before the dinner. He was in his study, talking to someone on the telephone, I think. He said the chalice was a means to an end, that it would settle old debts. I didn't understand, but it frightened me. Sir Reginald rose, his voice trembling with anger. This is preposterous. I made no such call. Eleanor, you must be mistaken. Poirot's eyes gleamed, his voice calm but incisive. Mistaken, Sir Reginald? Or perhaps Mademoiselle Grey has revealed a truth you wish to keep hidden? A telephone call? A debt? A chalice? These are not coincidences. What debts do you speak of? Sir Reginald sank back into his chair, his hands trembling. I have no debts. The girl is confused. She must have misheard. But the room was alight with suspicion now, the guests exchanging wary glances. Lady Beatrice's eyes narrowed, her voice icy. Reginald, if you've brought trouble to this house, you owe us an explanation. Poirot raised a hand,
his voice commanding silence. "Enough. Mademoiselle Grey, your courage is admirable. This revelation, it changes the picture. The chalice, it is not merely stolen, it is a pawn."
Meal was a somber affair, the guests' faces etched with fear and distrust. Hastings watched as Poirot observed, his gaze lingering on Sir Reginald's trembling hands and Eleanor's tear-streaked face. The Crimson Chalice, though absent, seemed to loom larger than ever, its shadow casting doubt on every word and gesture. And as the rain continued to fall, Hastings knew that Blackthorn Hall was on the brink of a revelation that would shake its very foundations.
Chapter 9. The Tapestry Unravels. The relentless rain had turned the grounds of Blackthorn Hall into a quagmire, the paths slick with mud and the air heavy with the scent of wet earth. Inside, the manor was no less oppressive, its grand halls and somber portraits suffused with a tension that seemed to pulse with every tick of the grandfather clock. The 6th day of Hercule Poirot's investigation had arrived, and Captain Arthur Hastings, standing in the library, felt the mystery of the Crimson Chalice drawing toward a crescendo. The clues, wax, a scratch, a shadow, a whispered telephone call, were threads in a tapestry that Poirot was now poised to unravel. Poirot stood before the map of the manor, his small frame radiating an almost electric intensity. His notebook, now nearly filled with his meticulous script, lay open beside him, its pages a map of his deductions. His green eyes gleamed with the certainty of a man who had glimpsed the truth, and Hastings, watching his friend, felt a mix of anticipation and dread. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low but vibrant, "today we shall pull the final thread. The Crimson Chalice, it is not merely a stolen relic, it is a key to a secret that someone in this house will do anything to protect. We have pressed, we have provoked, and now the truth will emerge." Hastings nodded, his mind racing to keep up. "You're certain the chalice is still in the house, Poirot? But where? We've searched every room, every corner." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile beneath it. "The chalice, Hastings, is hidden not by walls, but by misdirection. The thief, they are clever, but they have made one mistake, a mistake that Hercule Poirot has seen. Tonight, we shall gather all in the dining room, and I shall reveal the truth." The announcement came at luncheon, where the guests, now haggard from days of suspicion, gathered with palpable reluctance. Sir Reginald, his face drawn, sat at the head of the table, his eyes avoiding Miss Eleanor Grey, whose tearful revelation the previous day had cast a shadow over him. Lady Beatrice, her composure fraying, toyed with her pearl necklace, her gaze sharp and wary. Dr. and Mrs. Langley sat close, their hands clasped, while Major Bryce's usual bluster was subdued, his ruddy face pale. Mr. Crane, his thin frame rigid, stared at his plate, and Eleanor, her eyes red-rimmed, seemed to shrink into herself. Poirot stood, his presence commanding the room.
A voice broke the silence, trembling with urgency. "Monsieur Poirot, enough of this suspense. If you know who took the chalice, name them." Poirot raised a hand, his eyes gleaming. "Patience, Sir Reginald. The truth, it requires order. Let us begin with the facts. The chalice was taken between 9 and 9:03 during Monsieur Grayson's absence to the cellar.
The alcove is visible from the dining room, yet no one saw the thief. The wax on the sideboard, it is fresh, yet no candles were used. The scratch on the floor, it suggests movement, yet the chalice is large, conspicuous. And then there is the shadow seen by the maid, Sarah, and the rustle heard by Mademoiselle Grey. These are not accidents. They are clues to a plan. Lady Beatrice's voice was icy. A plan, Monsieur Poirot. You suggest this was premeditated? Not a crime of opportunity? Précisément, Poirot said. The thief they planned meticulously, but they could not plan for everything. Let us consider the motives. Sir Reginald, you spoke of the chalice as a triumph, a legacy. Yet Mademoiselle Grey overheard you say it was a means to an end. What end, Sir Reginald? Sir Reginald's face flushed, his hands gripping the table. I told you she misheard. I made no such call. Poirot's gaze shifted to Eleanor, who shrank under his scrutiny. Mademoiselle, your tears were genuine, but your story, it is not complete. You heard something, but it was not Sir Reginald. You sought to protect someone, perhaps, or to deflect suspicion. Who was it? Eleanor's eyes widened, her voice a whisper. I don't know what you mean, monsieur. I told you what I heard. Poirot's voice softened, but his words were relentless. No, mademoiselle. You heard a conversation, but it was not in the study. It was in the corridor near the alcove at 8:30 when you heard the rustle. You heard someone speak of debts, of the chalice, and you feared to reveal the truth. The room erupted in murmurs, but Poirot's raised hand silenced them. Let us turn to the wax. A candle was used, but why? The dining room was lit. The answer, mes amis, lies in the alcove itself. Hastings, you will recall the partition, a heavy wooden screen carved with vines that obscures the pedestal from certain angles. Behind this partition there is a panel, a secret compartment known only to the Velmont family. Is this not so, Sir Reginald? Sir Reginald's face paled, his voice barely audible. How did you know? Poirot smiled faintly. The scratch on the floor, it leads to the partition. The wax, it dripped from a candle used to light the compartment's lock,
Said, his voice cutting through the din. The theft was not about the chalice's value. It was about control, about power. And the one who hid it. His eyes fixed on Mrs. Clara Langley, whose face had gone ashen. Madame Langley, you were at the window near the alcove at 9 o'clock. You carried a candle hidden in your shawl to light the compartment. You knew of its existence, perhaps from Sir Reginald's papers, and you used it to hide the chalice. Clara's hands trembled, her voice breaking. No, I didn't. I was at the window. Dr. Langley rose, his face livid. This is outrageous, Poirot. You accuse my wife without proof. Proof? Poirot said, producing a small object from his pocket, a fragment of blue silk identical to the scrap found in the garden. This was found in the compartment, madame, along with the chalice which I recovered this morning. Your shawl, it betrayed you. And the sedative tablets in your husband's room, they were not for him, but for you, to calm your nerves after the act. Clara collapsed into her chair, sobbing. I had to. Sir Reginald, he was using the chalice to blackmail us, to ruin us. He knew about Mortimer's debts, his mistakes. He said he'd expose us unless we paid. Sir Reginald's face contorted with shock. Blackmail? Clara! I did no such thing! Poirot's voice was steady. No, Sir Reginald, you did not. But someone led Madame Langley to believe you did. The anonymous letter, the telephone call. They were staged
to provoke her fear. And who had access to your papers, your secrets? Who stood to gain by sowing chaos? His eyes turned to Mr. Crane, whose thin frame seemed to collapse under the weight of the accusation. "Crane," Poirot said, "you drafted Sir Reginald's will. You knew of his plans, his vulnerabilities. You sent the letter. You staged the call, using a voice to mimic Sir Reginald. You drove Madame Langley to act, knowing she would hide the chalice, creating a scandal to destabilize the Velmont estate. Your motive? Greed, perhaps, or a desire to control the inheritance through Mademoiselle Grey." Crane's face twisted, his voice a hiss. "You have no proof, Poirot." But Eleanor's voice, soft but clear, cut through. "It's true. I heard him, not Sir Reginald. It was Mr. Crane, in the corridor, speaking of debts. I was too afraid to say." The room fell silent, the truth laid bare. Poirot nodded, his expression somber. "The chalice is safe, mes amis, and the guilty are revealed. Madame Langley acted out."
The rain had finally ceased, leaving Blackthorn Hall bathed in a tentative sunlight that filtered through the clouds, casting long shadows across the manor's ancient walls. The 7th day of Hercule Poirot's investigation dawned with an air of finality, as if the house itself sensed that the mystery of the Crimson Chalice had reached its end. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing in the drawing-room, felt a strange mix of relief and melancholy. The revelations of the previous night had shaken the household, exposing secrets that had festered in silence, and now the time had come to tie up the loose ends of the case. Hercule Poirot stood before the assembled guests, his small figure commanding the room with an authority that belied his stature. The Crimson Chalice, retrieved from the secret compartment behind the alcove's partition, rested once more on its velvet-lined pedestal, its ruby-hued crystal catching the morning light. The guests, Sir Reginald, Lady Beatrice, Dr. and Mrs. Langley, Major Bryce, Mr. Crane, and Miss Eleanor Grey, sat in a tense semicircle, their faces a tableau of shock, guilt, and resignation. Grayson, the butler, stood at attention near the door, his expression unreadable, but his posture rigid with the weight of the moment. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant. "The mystery of the Crimson Chalice is solved, but the truth, it is never simple. The chalice, it was not merely stolen, it was a pawn in a game of fear and manipulation. Madame Langley, driven by terror, hid the chalice to protect her husband's secrets. Monsieur Crane, the architect of this deception, used her fear to sow chaos, hoping to gain control over the Velmont estate. And Mademoiselle Grey, with her courage, revealed the truth that set this resolution in motion." Mrs. Clara Langley, her face pale and tear-streaked, sat with her husband's arm around her. I never meant for it to go this far," she whispered. "I thought Sir Reginald was going to ruin us. I only wanted to protect Mortimer." Dr. Langley, his spectacles glinting, squeezed her hand. "It's over, Clara. We'll face the consequences together." Sir Reginald, his silver hair disheveled, rose from his chair, his voice heavy with emotion. "Monsieur Poirot, I owe you an apology. I dismissed the letter, the warnings, as nonsense. I never imagined they would lead to such betrayal." His eyes flicked to Mr. Crane, who sat rigid, his thin face a mask of defiance. Crane's voice was low, almost a hiss. "You can prove nothing, Poirot. The chalice is back. Let this end here." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mustache twitching. "No, Monsieur Crane. The law, it does not forgive so easily. The letter, the staged telephone call, these were your doing, confirmed by Mademoiselle Grey's testimony and the evidence of your own actions." Frame, trembling, spoke softly. "I'm sorry, Mr. Crane. I couldn't keep silent any longer. You use me, use my trust to manipulate this house.
Lady Beatrice, her green eyes blazing, leaned forward.
You've brought shame to us all, Crane. And to think I trusted you with Reginald's affairs.
Major Bryce, his ruddy face flushed, muttered, "Damned scoundrel. Should have known a lawyer couldn't be trusted." Poirot raised a hand, silencing the murmurs. "Enough, mes amis. The chalice is restored, but the wounds it has revealed will take time to heal. Sir Reginald, I advise you to secure the chalice in a vault, far from prying eyes. Its beauty, it is a temptation, and temptation breeds betrayal." Sir Reginald nodded, his expression sombre. "I've learned my lesson, Monsieur Poirot. The chalice will be locked away, and I shall review my associations, starting with my solicitor." He cast a pointed glance at Crane. Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice low. "Mon ami, you see how the little grey cells triumph? The wax, the scratch, the silk? These were but signposts to the truth. But it was the human heart, the fear of Madame Langley, the greed of Monsieur Crane, the courage of Mademoiselle Grey that revealed the path." Hastings, marvelling at his friend's brilliance, nodded. "You've done it again, Poirot. But how did you know the chalice was in the compartment?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "The scratch, Hastings. It led to the partition. And the wax, it spoke of a candle used in secret. The compartment, it was a family secret, mentioned in passing by Sir Reginald's father in an old journal I found in the library. The rest, it was a matter of psychology, observing the cracks in their stories." As the authorities arrived to take Mr. Crane into custody, and Mrs. Langley agreed to cooperate with their inquiries, the guests dispersed, their faces heavy with the weight of the truth. Eleanor Gray lingered, approaching Poirot with a shy smile. "Thank you, monsieur. You freed us from this shadow." Poirot bowed slightly. "It is my duty, mademoiselle, to restore order where chaos reigns." Later, as Poirot and Hastings prepared to depart Blackthorn Hall, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow over the estate. The manor, though scarred by the events of the past week, stood resolute, its secrets laid bare. Hastings, carrying their bags to the waiting car, glanced at Poirot, who paused to adjust his hat with meticulous care. "Another case solved, eh, Poirot?" Hastings said, a grin tugging at his lips. "Oui, mon ami," Poirot replied, his voice warm with satisfaction. "The Crimson Chalice, it was a symbol of betrayal, was now a reminder of the power of truth and of the brilliance of Hercule Poirot." Chapter 11. Reflections in the Chalice. The journey back to London was a quiet one, the hum of the car's engine a soothing counterpoint to the tumult of the past week at Blackthorn Hall. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated beside Hercule Poirot in the back of the chauffeured vehicle, gazed out at the rolling Kentish countryside, now bathed in the golden light of a late afternoon sun. The mystery of the Crimson Chalice had been resolved, its secrets laid bare, yet Hastings felt a lingering unease, as if the echoes of Blackthorn Hall's drama still reverberated in his mind. Poirot, immaculate as ever in his charcoal suit, sat with his hands folded neatly in his lap, his eyes half closed in a state of serene contemplation. His small notebook, now closed and tucked into his pocket, was a silent testament to the triumph of his little grey cells. Hastings, accustomed to his friend's reflective silences, ventured to break it. "Poirot," he said, turning to the detective, "you solved the case brilliantly, as always. And I can't help wondering, how did you know it was Crane orchestrating the whole thing? The clues pointed to so many others." Poirot's eyes opened, a faint twinkle in their green depths. Mon ami, the clues, they are like stars in the night sky. Each shines, but only together do they form a constellation. The wax, the scratch, the silk scrap, these were physical, oui, but the true clues were in the behavior, the psychology. Monsieur Crane, he was too careful, too quick to deflect. His insistence on the handkerchief, it was a story too perfect, too rehearsed. And Mademoiselle Gray's fear, she protected him, but her heart betrayed her guilt. Hastings nodded, though his brow furrowed. And Mrs. Langley? You were certain she hit the chalice, but she seemed so fragile. How did you know she had the nerve to do it? Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of amusement. Fragile, Hastings? No. Madame Langley was a woman driven by love and fear, a potent combination. The sedative tablets, they were hers, to calm the panic of her act. The silk scrap, it matched her shawl, and her position near the alcove at the critical moment. It was no coincidence. She believed Sir Reginald was a threat, and Crane, he fed that fear with his letter and his staged call. Hastings leaned back, marveling at the intricacy of it all. And the secret compartment. How did you find it? That journal you mentioned. You never told me you'd read it. Poirot chuckled softly. A small omission, mon ami. The library. It is a treasure
Rolled through a small village, its cottages quaint and serene, a stark contrast to the turmoil of Blackthorn Hall. Hastings glanced at Poirot, a question lingering in his mind. Do you think Sir Reginald will be all right? After all this, his trust betrayed, his sister's accusations, Eleanor's revelation? Poirot's expression softened, a rare moment of empathy. Sir Reginald, he is a man of pride, but also of resilience. The chalice, it will be locked away, and he will rebuild his trust, with his sister, with Mademoiselle Gray. The wounds, they heal, but they leave scars. He will learn to guard his heart as he guards his treasures. Hastings smiled faintly. And poor Eleanor, she was caught in the middle of it all. I hope she finds some peace. Oui, Poirot agreed. Mademoiselle Gray, she showed courage, speaking the truth despite her fear. She is young, but she will grow stronger for it. The chalice, it tested her, but it also set her free. As they approached the outskirts of London, the city's familiar skyline came into view, a reminder of the world beyond Blackthorn Hall's intrigues. Poirot adjusted his hat with meticulous care, his voice taking on a lighter tone. And now, Hastings, we return to civilization, where the tea is properly brewed and the mysteries, they await. But first, I require a cup of tisane, properly prepared, mind you. Hastings laughed, the tension of the past week easing. You and your tisane, Poirot. I'll stick to a good cup of English tea, thank you. The car pulled up to Poirot's London flat, its familiar elegance a welcome sight. As they stepped out, Hastings glanced at his friend, a wave of gratitude washing over him. You know, Poirot, I never tire of watching you work. The way you see through the lies, the way you piece it all together. It's extraordinary. Poirot bowed slightly, his eyes twinkling. Merci, mon ami. The little grey cells, they are always at your service. But come, let us rest. The Crimson Chalice, it is behind us, and the next adventure, it calls. Inside, as Poirot prepared his cherished tisane, and Hastings settled with a newspaper, the events of Blackthorn Hall seemed to fade into memory, like a story concluded. The Crimson Chalice, with its ruby glow and shadowed history, had revealed the frailties and strength of those it touched, and in its resolution, Hercule Poirot had once again proven that no secret could withstand the relentless pursuit of truth. Chapter 12. A New Dawn. The London flat of Hercule Poirot was a haven of order and elegance.
its polished surfaces and neatly arranged furnishings a stark contrast to the chaotic web of secrets they had unraveled at Blackthorn Hall. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated in a comfortable armchair by the window, sipped his tea and gazed out at the bustling city street below.
That is story about a clickus numerto that happened of manager floost.
I, my mother, is the fair, until a ready to egrestial drawn, and I took two listims, one some solicited, when some neveling, if you was stall the crane, and a vio. It's a story about a clissus numerto, just the years of a floud in the soul, and then ran me to Provelof, but ticking shears years bought away, with the starn, 9, and 8 hands for developings. Just and I friend. A 17 and pre. Poirot said. Poirot said desk. Ears of those breed. Transtorm to the surf teen. Concerned, undiv herdens, undin. If you was stormed the foremost too, and was raised, you're lodged. And yes, and Poirot said. Poirot said just. She and Dr. Langley have returned to their home in Surrey. The authorities were lenient, given her cooperation and Crane's manipulation. She's to face no charges, though I imagine the guilt will linger. Poirot nodded, his fingers tapping lightly on the desk. Guilt, it is a heavy burden, but love, it can lighten it. Madame Langley acted to protect her husband, and in that there is a kind of honour. As for Monsieur Crane, the law will ensure he pays for his deceit.
Precise as his deductions. Hastings watched, amused by his friend's fastidiousness, but his thoughts returned to Blackthorn Hall. You know, Poirot, I can't help but feel a bit sorry for Sir Reginald. He was so proud of that chalice, and now it's locked away, out of sight. Poirot returned with his steaming cup, settling into his chair with a sigh of contentment. Oui, Hastings, but pride, it is a dangerous thing. The chalice, it was a symbol of his achievements, but also of his vulnerabilities. In locking it away, he protects not only the relic, but himself. A lesson well learned. Hastings chuckled. You're always teaching lessons, Poirot, even when you're solving crimes. What's next for us, then? Another mystery, I suppose? Poirot's eyes twinkled, a mischievous glint in their depths. Always, mon ami. The world, it is full of puzzles, and Hercule Poirot, he is never idle. But for now, we shall enjoy the calm, the tisane, the tea, the order of our little world. The next adventure, it will find us soon enough. As the afternoon sun cast golden rays through the window, illuminating the room with a warm glow, Hastings felt a sense of peace settle over him. The Crimson Chalice had been a trial, a test of trust and truth, but it had also been a reminder of the enduring bond between him and Poirot. Together they had faced the shadows of Blackthorn Hall and emerged into the light, ready for whatever mysteries awaited them. The clock on the mantel chimed softly, marking the passage of time. Outside, London hummed with life, its streets a tapestry of stories yet to be told. And in the quiet of Poirot's flat, as the detective sipped his tisane,
and Hastings turned to his newspaper. The promise of new adventures hung in the air, as certain as the dawn that followed even the darkest night. Chapter 13. Echoes of the Past. The soft glow of evening settled over London, casting a warm amber light through the windows of Hercule Poirot's immaculate flat. The city's hum was a distant murmur, a backdrop to the quiet order of the detective's sanctuary. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated in his usual armchair, leafed through a newspaper, though his thoughts were far from the headlines. The Crimson Chalice case, now resolved, lingered in his mind, its intricate web of deceit and redemption, a story he knew he would recount for years to come. Yet something about the case felt unfinished, as if a final piece of the puzzle remained just out of reach. Hercule Poirot, seated at his desk, was polishing a small silver paperweight with a cloth, his movements precise and rhythmic. His eyes, however, were distant, as if his little grey cells were still turning over the events of Blackthorn Hall. The Crimson Chalice, now safely ensconced in a London vault, was no longer a physical presence.
Chalice. It still haunts you, no? Hastings looked up, startled by Poirot's perceptiveness. You're uncanny, Poirot. I was just thinking about Blackthorn Hall, about how it all ended so neatly, yet, I don't know, there's something nagging at me. Did we miss anything? Some detail we overlooked? Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing beneath it. You are learning, Hastings, to sense the echoes of a case. Oui, there is always a shadow, a whisper of what might have been. But in this instance, I assure you, the tapestry is complete. Or is it your heart that seeks one final revelation? Hastings chuckled, shaking his head. Perhaps it's just me being sentimental. I keep thinking about Eleanor Gray, how she stood up to Crane, how she found her voice, and Sir Reginald rebuilding trust with his sister. It's a happy ending, of sorts, but it feels fragile. Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful. Fragile, oui, but such is the nature of human bonds. They are tested, they break, they mend. The chalice, it was a catalyst, revealing truths that needed to be seen. But come, mon ami, let us consider the present. I have received a curious letter this morning, one that may shed light on your unease. Poirot retrieved an envelope from his desk, its paper crisp and embossed with the crest of Blackthorn Hall. He opened it with care, revealing a letter written in Sir Reginald's elegant hand. Read, Hastings, he said, passing it over. Hastings scanned the letter, his eyes widening as he read. Dear Monsieur Poirot, I write to express my deepest gratitude for your brilliance in resolving the matter of the Crimson Chalice. Your insight not only restored my property, but saved my household from further ruin. I have taken your advice and secured the chalice in a vault where it will remain. But there is another matter, one I hesitate to mention, yet feel you must know. Eleanor has confided in me about a second letter, one she found in Crane's belongings before he was taken into custody. It was not in his hand but typed, much like the first anonymous warning, and it spoke of a debt long owed to an unknown party. Eleanor believes it may relate to my late father's dealings, perhaps a transaction tied to the chalice's acquisition. I dismissed it as another of Crane's manipulations, but I cannot shake a sense of unease. Should you have any insight, I would be grateful for your counsel. Yours sincerely, Sir Reginald Velmont. Hastings looked up, his brow furrowed. Another letter? Poirot, do you think there's more to this? Could Crane have had an accomplice? Poirot's eyes gleamed, his fingers steepled before him. An accomplice? Possible but unlikely. Monsieur Crane, he was a solitary schemer, driven by his own ambition. This
Ode. It echoes the words Mademoiselle Gray overheard. There may be a deeper history to the chalice, one that Sir Reginald's father left buried. Hastings leaned forward, intrigued. You think there's another mystery here? Something tied to the chalice's past? Poirot rose, pacing slowly before the fireplace.
The chalice,
It is a relic of the Crusades, a vessel of beauty and blood. Such objects, they carry stories, debts, betrayals, promises unkept. Sir Reginald's father, he acquired it under mysterious circumstances, no? Perhaps this letter hints at a truth he wished to conceal, but for now it is a shadow, not a case. I shall write to Sir Reginald, advising vigilance, but we shall not pursue it unless the shadow grows darker. Hastings nodded, though his curiosity was piqued. And if it does, will we return to Blackthorn Hall? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. If the call comes, mon ami, Hercule Poirot will answer. But for now, we rest. The chalice, it has told its story, and we have played our part. Let us enjoy the calm before the next storm. The evening passed in quiet companionship, Poirot with his tisane and Hastings with a novel, the city's lights twinkling beyond the window. The Crimson Chalice, though locked away, seemed to cast a final echo, a reminder that even solved mysteries leave ripples in their wake. As the clock chimed softly, marking the hour, Hastings felt a renewed sense of purpose. With Poirot by his side, no secret could remain hidden forever, and the promise of new adventures was as certain as the stars above London's ever-turning sky. Chapter 14. The Shadow of Doubt. The soft patter of rain had returned to London, a gentle drizzle that painted the city's streets with a reflective sheen, mirroring the flickering gaslights. Inside Hercule Poirot's meticulously ordered flat, the atmosphere was one of quiet anticipation, as if the echoes of the Crimson Chalice case were not yet ready to fade into memory. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated by the fire with a cup of tea, found his thoughts drifting back to Blackthorn Hall, to the cryptic second letter mentioned by Sir Reginald. The possibility of an unresolved thread in the case gnawed at him, a puzzle piece that refused to fit neatly into the resolution. Hercule Poirot, seated at his desk, was reviewing a stack of correspondence, his small hands moving with the precision of a watchmaker. His green eyes, sharp and alert, betrayed a mind still engaged with the intricacies of their recent adventure. The silver paperweight, now gleaming, sat beside him, a silent witness to his methodical nature. Hastings, sensing an opportunity to probe further, set down his cup. "Poirot," he began, his tone cautious. "That letter from Sir Reginald, the one about the second anonymous note Eleanor found. You said it was likely another of Crane's tricks, but what if it wasn't? What if there's something more to the chalice's history?"
Poirot paused, his pen hovering over a sheet of paper, a faint smile tugging at his mustache. "Mon ami, you are like a dog with a bone, no? The chalice, it has left its mark on you. Very well. Let us consider this shadow of doubt. The letter, it speaks of a debt long owed, a phrase that echoes Mademoiselle Grey's overheard words. This is no coincidence, but whether it is a new mystery or lingering echo of the old, we must tread carefully."
Hastings leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "You think there might be truth to it, then? Something tied to Sir Reginald's father, perhaps?" Poirot rose, pacing slowly before the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back. "The Crimson Chalice. It is a relic of great age, Hastings. Such objects, they carry histories, debts, as Sir Reginald's letter suggests, that may span generations. His father, Lord Edmund Velmore, acquired the chalice under circumstances that were, shall we say, obscure. The journal I found in the library spoke of its purchase from a private collector, but the details were vague, almost deliberately so. This second letter, it may point to a truth buried in that transaction." Hastings frowned, his mind racing. "You mean to say the chalice might have been stolen originally or tied to some old feud?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Possible, mon ami? The Crusades, they were a time of conquest and betrayal. A relic like the chalice, it may have been claimed under questionable means, its ownership disputed. If Lord Edmund's acquisition was less than honourable, it could explain the warnings, the sense of ruin that followed the chalice to Blackthorn Hall." Hastings reached for Sir Reginald's letter, rereading the key passage. "Eleanor found it in Crane's belongings, though. Why would he have it if it wasn't part of his scheme?" Poirot stopped pacing, his gaze fixed on the fire. Monsieur Crane, he was a man of cunning. He may have discovered this older letter, perhaps in Sir Reginald's papers,
and used it to craft his own deception, weaving a new threat from an old one. Or, he paused, his voice lowering, it is possible the letter came to him from another source, someone with knowledge of the chalice's past. This, Hastings, is the shadow we must investigate. A knock at the door interrupted their discussion. Poirot's landlady, Mrs. Hudson, entered with a telegram, her face apologetic for the intrusion. Poirot took the envelope, his fingers deftly opening it. His expression shifted, a mix of surprise and intrigue as he read the message aloud. Monsieur Poirot, urgent, another letter received, same typewriter, same tone, mentions blood debt, and demands Chalice's return to rightful owner. I fear this is beyond Crane. Request your immediate assistance, Sir Reginald Velmont. Hastings' eyes widened. Good heavens, Poirot, another letter. This can't be a coincidence. We need to go back to Blackthorn Hall.
Poirot's mustache twitched, his mind clearly racing.
We, Hastings, the shadow grows darker. This blood debt, it is no mere metaphor. The chalice, it seems, has not yet told its full story. We shall return to Blackthorn Hall at once, but first, I must make inquiries. The typewriter. It may be a clue, its make, its origin, and this rightful owner. We must uncover who claims such a title.
Hastings felt a surge of excitement, tempered by unease. You think this is connected to the chalice's history, don't you? Something from the Crusades, perhaps? Poirot nodded, his expression grave. The Crusades, they left scars that linger even now. The chalice, it may be tied to a vow, a theft, a betrayal long forgotten, except by those who seek to reclaim it. We shall pack our bags, mon ami, and prepare for a new chapter in this tale. But we must proceed with caution, for this mystery, it may be deeper and more dangerous than the last. As Poirot began drafting a response to Sir Reginald, promising their arrival by the following morning, Hastings felt the familiar thrill of a new case. The Crimson Chalice, though locked away, was not yet at rest. Its ruby glow seemed to beckon from the shadows, promising secrets older and more perilous than those they had uncovered. With Poirot's brilliance to guide them, Hastings knew they would face whatever lay ahead, ready to unravel the final threads of a mystery that spanned centuries. Chapter 15. The Trail of the Typewriter. The train to Kent rattled through the countryside, its steady rhythm a counterpoint to the restless anticipation that filled Captain Arthur Hastings. Seated across from Hercule Poirot in their private compartment, he watched the rain-streaked fields pass by, his mind consumed with the cryptic telegram from Sir Reginald Velmont. The mention of a blood debt and a rightful owner had reignited the mystery of the Crimson Chalice, transforming what had seemed a closed case into a labyrinth of deeper secrets. The chalice, though safely locked in a London vault, seemed to exert a pull that drew them back to Blackthorn Hall. Poirot, immaculate in his travelling coat, sat with his small notebook open, his pen moving with deliberate precision as he jotted down notes. His green eyes, sharp and focused, betrayed a mind already dissecting the new clues. The telegram from Sir Reginald lay beside him, its urgent words a beacon guiding their return. Hastings, unable to contain his curiosity, leaned forward. "Poirot," he said, "this new letter, this blood debt business. You're certain it's not just another of Crane's tricks, even from behind bars?" Poirot paused, his pen hovering, a faint smile beneath his moustache. "No, Hastings, Monsieur Crane is a cunning man, but his influence is curtailed. The authority—"
Oui, but its tone, its demand for the chalice's return, it suggests a motive older, deeper than Crane's greed. We must consider the possibility of another hand, one tied to the chalice's ancient history. Hastings frowned, his mind racing. You mentioned the typewriter as a clue. How can we trace it? And this rightful owner, who could they be after all these centuries? Poirot's eyes gleamed. The typewriter, mon ami. It is a modern clue to an ancient mystery. The letters, they are typed on a machine with a distinctive flaw, a misaligned E that tilts slightly to the right. I have seen this before in documents from a certain antiquarian society in London, one known for its interest in Crusader relics. As for the rightful owner, we must look to the chalice's origins. The Crusades, they were a time of conquest, and the chalice, it may have been taken from a family, a sect, or even a sacred order. This blood debt, it suggests a vow of vengeance, perhaps passed down through generations. Hastings' eyes widened. A secret order? Like the Knights Templar or something? Poirot chuckled softly. Not so dramatic, Hastings, but not impossible. The chalice, it was crafted in the 12th century, a time of religious fervor and territorial wars. Its ruby crystal, its intricate design, these suggest a purpose beyond mere decoration. It may have been a ceremonial vessel, stolen during a siege, or bartered in a betrayal. Sir Reginald's father, Lord Edmund, acquired it from a private collector. But who was this collector? That is the question we must answer. The train slowed as it approached the station near Blackthorn Hall, the familiar silhouette of the manor's towers visible through the mist. As they disembarked, a car awaited them, sent by Sir Reginald. The drive to the estate was silent, the weight of the new mystery pressing upon them. Blackthorn Hall loomed ahead, its stone facade both welcoming and foreboding, as if it guarded secrets older than its walls. Sir Reginald greeted them at the door, his face etched with worry. Eleanor Gray stood beside him, her delicate features pale but resolute. "Monsieur Poirot? Captain Hastings?" Sir Reginald said, his voice strained. "Thank you for coming so quickly. This new letter. It's shaken us all. I thought the chalice's curse was behind us." Poirot bowed slightly, his eyes scanning the hall. "There is no curse, Sir Reginald. Only human motives. Show me this letter, s'il vous plaît." In the drawing room, Sir Reginald produced the letter.
Reginald, where was this letter found? Eleanor spoke up, her voice soft but steady.
It was delivered to the manor yesterday, slipped under the door. I found it when I came down for breakfast. There was no envelope, no postmark, just the letter itself. Poirot's gaze sharpened. And you, mademoiselle, you found the first letter in Monsieur Crane's belongings. Have you seen anything else, papers, notes, perhaps in his study, that might connect to this? Eleanor hesitated, then nodded. There was a notebook, Monsieur Poirot. I didn't mention it before because I thought it unimportant, but it had names, dates, references to a Brotherhood of the Crimson Veil. I thought it was just Crane's scribblings, but now... Poirot's eyes lit up. The Brotherhood of the Crimson Veil? This is most significant. Hastings, you recall my mention of an antiquarian society, the Brotherhood? They are a secretive group rumored to guard relics from the Crusades. Their existence is whispered, never confirmed. But this letter, this typewriter, it points to them. Sir Reginald's face paled. A secret society? My father never mentioned such a thing. Could he have crossed them when he bought the chalice? Poirot nodded gravely. It is possible, Sir Reginald. Your father's journal, it spoke of a collector named Alaric Moreau, a Frenchman with ties to esoteric circles. If Moreau was part of this brotherhood, the chalice's sale may have been a betrayal of their code. The blood debt, it may be their claim for retribution. Hastings felt a chill, the weight of centuries pressing upon him. What do we do, Poirot? If this brotherhood is real, they could be dangerous. Poirot's expression was resolute. We shall investigate, mon ami. First, we return to London to trace the typewriter. I have contacts at Scotland Yard who can assist. Then we shall seek out this Alaric Moreau or his descendants. The chalice, it is safe for now, but its history, it demands answers. As they prepared to leave Blackthorn Hall, Eleanor approached Poirot, her eyes earnest. Monsieur Poirot, please, find the truth. I want Blackthorn Hall to be free of this shadow. Poirot bowed, his voice gentle but firm. Mademoiselle, I, Hercule Poirot, shall leave no stone unturned. The Crimson Chalice will reveal its final secrets, and the truth, it will prevail. The car rolled back toward the station, Blackthorn Hall fading into the mist. Hastings glanced at Poirot, whose face was set with determination. The Crimson Chalice, a relic of beauty and blood, had drawn them into a mystery that spanned ages, and with every step they moved closer to uncovering a truth that could shake the foundations of history itself.